With this program, the Rural Resurgence Action Acceleration. With us today on the panel, we have Mr. James Matheson, Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer with Aspirus, Dan Smith, President and CEO of the Cooperative Network, Damian Ackley, Vice President for Learning right here at North Central Technical College, Josh Schoeman, Washington County Executive, Paul Lepre, Myron Construction and Chairman of the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, and Jenny Resch, Executive Director of the Economic Engagement and Strategic Partnerships with the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. So, lady and gentlemen, I want to pick up on something that was mentioned at during the last program. This idea of alignment and the comment that was made, some people say we like the way things are, let's keep them that way. But we all know that's a losing strategy because nothing is going to stay the same. Two of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, Dennis Winters, economist for the state of Wisconsin and the Department of Workforce Development, and Dale Knapp, Director of Forward Analytics, the premier research firm in the state, can tell us what we are going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years with great accuracy. If we like it, we should do exactly what we're doing now. But if we don't like it, and I would submit to you, in almost all cases, we will not like what we see in 20, 30, 40 years. The time to take action is now. So with that, and without going through what we are going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years, what action? And while I freely admit I am not a fan of the Royals, if you had a magic wand and could do anything, what is it we would do to position our state for future success? And it's unfair, but I will start with the lady. Jenny.
The obvious answer is invest in higher education and education, right? Did you expect anything else to come from my mouth? But seriously, I think action is the key here. I think even today, in my mind, there's so much discussion, so many paths, so many things we can do. But we need to focus and start with the champions, right? There are some people that are passionate that we may not be able to get every single last person on board to take action, but take action in the circles that you were able to and move forward. And then that energy builds from there. And so at UW-Stevens Point, there's a strategic doing effort that just launched in the entrepreneurship ecosystem that I think is one of those examples of just starting, right? Just starting to get together in smaller groups to build a network and ecosystem around entrepreneurship throughout the region. And that, to me, it's one way to focus and take some steps forward and then build up from there. So I'm going to keep it brief because there's a large panel, but take action.
We'll go right down the line, but announce who you are because we're not in order of the introductions. And while education is clearly number one, Jenny, the other number one, and I think Josh, you'll probably tell us this, county government has all the answers, and you'll explain to us what they are.
I don't think you can answer your question succinctly without thinking just a minute about the data. Dale Knapp in this room would tell us 20 years from now, we're going to be depopulating. And almost nobody who's alive today in America has lived through that before. Not that it's never happened in American history, or certainly world history. And to the point from the last panel, this is not everywhere in the globe, but it's a big portion of the globe. And for the United States and for Europe, it's a problem, and for China, it's a crisis. It's hundreds of fold worse than it is for the United States. So I think actually education and I think housing, I think prosperity in the next 50 years needs to be looked at through a different lens. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we're so used to the system, the infrastructure, the processes that we've built, whether it's education, whether it's county government, whether it's business. We're so used to doing the same things we've always done, the same way we've always done them, that it's going to be a shock to our system to have to figure out how to do it with no people. Because that's what we're facing, is 25 years of no people. Earlier, the panel 2 panels ago that I was on, we talked about what is the biggest challenge of recruiting and bringing people. It's that there are none. There are fewer and fewer millennials and Gen Zers to replace the massive amount of baby boomers that are leaving, retiring at 3 million baby boomers per year. That clip will stay on until the baby boomers fully leave the workforce. So we just have to think differently than we've thought in the past. And I think that involves a number of different things. Let's use the UW system as an example, because I absolutely agree the way for us to continue prosperity, to continue to pass the American dream on, is education. If you look at 100 years from 1900 to the year 2000, all of our major progress was because we started to graduate 8th grade. Then we started to graduate all kids through high school. Then we started to give undergraduate degrees at higher rates than we've ever seen. That progression needs to continue, but when you have a population, we're graduating in about 500 students per year out of the West Bend School District. Right now, 500 graduated last week Saturday. The 7th grade class has 350 kids in it. And that stays about flat to the kindergarten class. When they get up to the UW system, and I know the UW is talking about this, and I know technical colleges are talking about this, when that happens, how do we take this massive amount of resources that we've built out over 60 years for, at the time, the baby boomers, which are a much larger generation, how do we apply that in scope and scale in a way that still delivers highly effective education and yet to a much smaller audience? That's hard. We currently have 2 parallel tracks of education. Used to be vocational education in this type of facility and liberal arts education in a UW Stevens Point type of facility. Now we've allowed them to do exactly the same thing. Oh, and by the way, our high schools my son graduated with 12 credits to go to UW Cross. We have to completely transform the way that we're thinking about competing for the most precious resource, which is human talent. For us in Washington County, that starts with housing, but higher education is right at the top of the list. My county, from the state line in Wisconsin, when I started as county executive 3 short years ago, from the state line on the east side of the state all the way up to Green Bay, my county was the only county that didn't have access to a 4-year higher education institution, like in our property. Everybody else had one. Since then, Cardinal Stritch has closed, Silver Lake College is closed, Concordia University has shut down its satellite campuses. The private sector, the market, the education market is responding. Is the rest of society going to? And I think you can play that out in every different aspect, in every different industry. How are we going to start thinking differently now for a time when we just have less people?
For me, it begins with leadership. Personally, I have 5 qualities of leadership that I look for in every leader. Number 2 is to be a thoughtful listener. Not just a good listener, but a thoughtful listener. And number 4 in my list is the best leaders that I've ever known don't consider themselves experts. They consider themselves students first. They don't have all the answers. There's a young lady in the back, I don't mean to single you out, who was talking about housing. She moved here 2 years ago, couldn't find anything that was a good fit for her. Josh talked previously about home ownership and the importance of it. It's not available to everyone. I hate to tell you that. Life gets in the way. Health, bad investments, a business that went under, divorce. Home ownership is not available to everyone. So my question is are the developers telling us what we need, or are we telling them what we need? Feels to me like we're not listening. They're we're choosing for the people that are coming here. We're choosing for them what kind of housing they need. Seems a little bass-backwards to me. So for me, the action plan starts at leadership, and this is tough to say with the mayor's father sitting in the front row. I think this city, it's stunning to me that a community of this size doesn't have a city administrator. It is stunning to me. And it's certainly not a commentary on your daughter, Jim, not at all.
It's stunning to her, too.
Yeah, okay, so, and I know Katie's in favor of it, but I just can't imagine a city of this size not having an administrator, just to help along with some of the administrative stuff. Talk about all the legislation that we're talking about that we're blocking ourselves. Maybe a city administrator can help navigate the waters that exist today until we can affect change. Those are things that I think start with leadership, start with listening rather than trying to be the expert.
If I was going to pick three things to change or to continue to focus on, I think it would be focus, align, and then collaborate. So I think focusing on what we really need to do to move things forward and coming up with a plan that we can all agree on, or at least that a majority of us can agree on to move forward, and align on that specific topic. I think the collaboration, and I mentioned that a few panels ago, I think we do a really good job here in Central Wisconsin, but I think there's room to improve. I would agree with Jenny. Higher education, right? As a person from NTC here, obviously higher education we think is extremely valuable. When I think about the workforce, I think we need to retain our talent locally. Obviously, I think we need to attract as much as we can. But I think education can also help to do more with less people. So we can put in policies. We're working closely with UW-Stevens Point on transfer, so students can come in, can start working right away, can come to NTC, get an associate's degree, learn how to do things in a more efficient manner. Industry 4.0 techniques. I know the chamber, right, and all the initiatives that they're doing is very important with Industry 4.0. How can we do more with less? And then having those students transfer to UWSP where they're getting additional skills to help companies grow, help companies innovate, help companies think critically from all levels of employees. So, it's not just, like you said, there aren't people, there isn't a magic pool of people that we can just grab and go. I think we need to be more efficient with what we have too.
So when you go last, you kind of repackage what everyone else said. So as I listened to this, I in the sessions this morning, I think there's a few things we want to focus on. So one is set ambitious goals. A lot's at stake, so don't go in it with meagerness. We got to go out there aggressively, a growth mindset. Let's set ambitious goals for those for the communities we serve. The other thing that I hear, and especially, so I come from the De Pere market, where I used to work in the Fox Valley, lived in De Pere area. My kids went to school there. They're talking about how do they expand their schools and building new ones because they don't have enough. Then you get to Wausau, and it's all about compression. So it's a different mindset from where I'm coming from. But what I think some of the elements that are a little bit different is change readiness. When I hire people into this market, I brought talent in from all over the country into work on my teams. They respond and talk about how slow we are to change, not just at our company, but in this community. We are not prepared for change. And for us to be successful, we have to create an environment of change. And that's not easy, but it takes effort. And so I'm going to, so that would be the second point that I'd really reinforce here. And then the third one is rigorous implementation. We can talk strategy all day long, but when you have goals, you set a path forward, and you implement with heavy focus, tracking results, and course correcting and cycling through that path. And know where you want to go, and not every tactic to every strategy is going to work perfectly. It takes course correction, it takes listening, it takes trial and error, but rigorous implementation is core to making this go. And I think that's sometimes where a lot of these big efforts fall apart, and what separates one group from another is the implementation, because there could be, again, a lot of great ideas, but who's going to make it happen? And it takes more than just one or two people to make it happen. It takes the community at this level. So I'm just summarizing it all up into those three.
During the last panel, Bill had talked about a need for alignment, or I might say intimate a lack of alignment as one of the challenges for our rural economy to succeed. It seems quite clear to almost anyone who's studied economics that there needs to be some sort of major economic center for anything in concentric circles to succeed. I guess the question is this: do we have a lack of alignment? How important is the alignment of all those in a particular area for the rural economy to succeed? And what is it we might do to get people on board? Do we suffer from the chasing this shiny object, or I'm all on the same team until there's something better for me, and then I splinter off? Do we suffer from it, and how do we overcome it?
I think that I would say yes in some regards. So I get to work with Angel on with the Synergy board and Paul and others. So we're continuing to work on how do we forge ahead. I participate on some of the GWWP work that goes on within this area, and I think what it comes down to is alignment on some core ambitious goals. And you hear a lot of thoughts, let's do a lot with Rib Mountain. Let's do, you hear ideas in pockets all over, but what I'm missing is core alignment on big goals, because then once you have those goals, then you can debate the strategies of how to get there. But if you don't have alignment on where you want to go, that's the problem. And I don't think we have full, even this morning, we've heard a number of ideas on where we could go. Is it housing? Is it talent? Is it, and you can't say it's all of it because it's too much. So what's going to create our unique identity? What's going to be our differentiation? What's going to be our point of focus? We need to get to that alignment. And so without that, it's going to make any kind of strategy and implementation difficult.
So, Damien, let me rephrase the question a little bit, and let's stipulate that alignment is a necessary element of a successful rural economy. And let's further stipulate that we don't necessarily have it. So with those two as premises, what do we do to get alignment with all those parties involved that wish to see a resurging and vibrant rural economy?
I think, and honestly, and I know I'm probably using semantics here, but I think the alignment is there. I think we all know we need housing. Childcare is an issue, that high-speed internet's an issue, that education, everything else is an issue. I think what we need to look at is what the focus should be and prioritize that and say these are our top four. I appreciate Washington, County. They focused on housing, right? They picked one. I know little about it. I've heard some really good things about it, but they've picked a problem. They're focusing on it, and they're saying this is what we're going to take on. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they're doing something and taking action. I think that's something that we can benefit here, is saying, okay, these are going to be our top 2 priorities, 3 priorities, 1 priority, and we're going to focus on that, and then we're going to figure out the strategies to rigorously attack it and figure out what's going to work best for central Wisconsin.
We suffer from this innate desire or need to be fair to everyone. And in being fair to everyone, we are unfair to all. In other words, we're going to focus on X industry or X topic, whatever it might be. And then someone comes along and says, well, but what about me? We say, okay, of the $100 we're going to spend, I guess we should give you $10. And then what about me? And what about me? And pretty soon the $100 we were going to spend on challenge A, we only have $4 left, because everyone gets a little, which means we really don't make progress on anything. Do we suffer from that, and how do we overcome it?
Absolutely, 100%. I'll ask the group. I know I can't do it online. I live in Weston. When I travel outside of this area, where do I say I'm from?
Wausau.
Do we all do the same?
Visit Wausau.
Nobody knows where Weston is. Nobody knows where Schofield is, Rib Mountain, Rothschild.
And nobody cares from outside. I've already done the studies.
Get on board or get out of the way. If Weston, Schofield, Rothschild, they get a business, a new development of some sort, the community wins. We all win. Doesn't mean they're living in Rothschild. They're spending money in Wausau. They're spending money in Weston, Rib Mountain. My advice is, we are identified. If you're not on board, get out of the way. We had the same discussion as one of the founding board members of the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership. I can't tell you the number of conversations we had about the damn name. Well, we have to be inclusive. Why? When you travel outside the area, you say you're from Wausau. We're the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership. Greater Wausau means Marathon County, means the area, means Stevens Point. We're all in this together. So stop worrying about everyone's sensibilities and move the train forward.
Mr. Executive, you've been successful in getting people, for the most part, on board on a single issue. What's the magic ingredients?
Ingredient is listen first. When I put together my campaign and my policy agenda, I knew that one of the hurdles we faced was bringing our kids back. I didn't know what that meant. So it starts with a shared vision. Creating a shared vision for what it looks like to see 1% population growth per year for the next 10 years. Not explosive growth, like how do we just retain. That's the shared vision. Then it's how, okay, what's the one thing we're going to do really well, better than anybody else? Not the 10 things. I'm not going to have the best parks, and I'm going to have the best education, and I'm going to have the best, and I'm going to have, it's one thing that we're going to do better than everybody else. So how did we do it? Next generation housing is predicated on a task force of people. We start with our municipal partners, not because they're the biggest pain in the butt. We start with them because they are all of the other names that you listed. And nothing happens if the city administrator in Hartford says, I'm not going to do that. Nothing happens if the plan commission in the village of Jackson says, we're not changing anything. So if they're not sitting at the table, you can't even have a discussion about exclusionary zoning, as one example. You build consensus by having them sitting there, and you're listening to what are the pressure points for your community. What are the actual challenges to having that 1% come back? It is about inspiring a shared vision, but maybe as importantly, it's been 75 years, 100 years if you go back to where zoning really started. 100 years of small incremental additions to regulations at the local level that plan commissioners who sit on plan commissions today don't even understand because they weren't there when it started, or the 50 years in between of all the pieces that got added together. So that shared vision becomes crucial to where are we going? What are we trying to accomplish here? And as an elected county executive or an elected mayor, my job is to keep pushing forward and persuade people. Before I was county executive, I was county administrator in Washington County. Before that, I was the village administrator in the village of Richfield. I served in that role for almost 10 years in one community or another. Let me tell you, an administrator is only as good as whoever that chief elected official is. If you have a crappy chief elected official, you're going to have a crappy administrator. If you have a board that's completely dysfunctional, you're going to have a crappy administrator. It's not possible to work any other way. There's plenty of administrators sitting in this room who could testify to their inability to do their job if their bosses are incapable of doing their job. The solution is a shared vision. Who provides that shared vision? Who's the leader filling the vacuum is a separate question to be answered. But a shared vision and a leader, as was articulated earlier, who can drive towards and persuade people to come along on that vision. There's no such thing as a perfect process. And there's no such thing as everybody's going to agree on every step of how do we get to that vision. But having someone continuing to push us that way and demonstrating by their actions, modeling the way for how to get there, that's the type of leadership you need. And that's where we've been successful in Washington County. Not always, but we're batting over 300, which puts you in the Hall of Fame.
Kenny, there are positive examples, successful examples of smart people sharing a vision from the government community, business community, and academia. And that is how a shared vision with persuasive, charismatic leaders coming together and deciding on what it is a particular area wants to be when they grow up. From the academic perspective, how might that happen?
I'm going to go back to the quote I said earlier because I really believe this. Collaboration moves at the speed of trust. So I don't care what the initiative and who starts that conversation, but you have to trust who is in front of you leading whatever the conversation is. And in academia, like, our landscape continues to change so much, even though from the outside, I think we're viewed as very traditional, steeped, slow moving. We don't pivot quick enough. But we also have leaders that are the core to building consensus and building trust around those difficult conversations, right? So as an example, the thing that has come up here today is diversity, equity, inclusion, right? So that gets politicized, but yet it takes a leader that is able to build trust to know that, yes, you're not going to get every single person on board to where you're going, but as long as they trust you and you have integrity, you can begin to make change, and others will start to follow. So I think in academia, we are here to bring and convene with business and industry and help solve problems through many centers that, centers of excellence or, experts. But it comes down to, in my opinion, to being able to have honest conversations in order to start to take steps forward. So to me, that's key to our region. I'm going to go back to, are we aligned? In some small areas we are, but the bigger hurdles that we face as a region, I don't feel we are aligned where we need to be to start making drastic improvement in being a region to attract from outside.
All right, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions of this panel, and if not, I've got plenty. So just raise your hand or speak up. Yes, sir.
It's been a pretty interesting conversation. Not a lot of chance to ask questions, so I was going to ask one to the last panel. So I'll throw it out to you guys. So for the first thing that I see is, like, I live in Marshfield, and I have spent about 10 years not living in Marshfield. So I've traveled regionally extensively. I'm operations and HR, so a lot of staffing. So when you guys are talking, I'm drinking a lot of this in. I can go from Marshfield to Green Bay in 2 hours. From Marshfield to Wausau, it takes me at least an hour. I'm going to get behind a tractor somewhere, right? So our road network here, nobody wants to live in Marshfield and come this way. So if you are white collar, you actively fight it. If you're blue collar, you're only going to go to Stratford at the most, right? So I think the conversation about becoming more aligned in the area is very on point. I can see it, and I can see it when I'm recruiting. What you're doing here is being done in 100 other areas probably today. And when they're talking about housing, they're talking about housing. So I came from a much bigger company with much bigger plants, 12 to probably 2,000 people plants. And we were building, and we would demand housing coming in, right? If you build housing, we can fill it. And I don't care if it's apartments, trailer parks, single family homes. I think that conversation is good. And I don't know what the right answer is there. I've seen all sorts of things done. Diversity is very important. So I look blue collar. We're not talking blue collar here. Blue collar builds communities. We're not going to do it with entrepreneurs. That's great if you bring them. If you don't have maintenance, how are you going to sustain it? If you don't have somebody who wants to take out the garbage, how are you going to sustain growth, right? Right now, you are short of maintenance people probably by 100% or more. So if you had double the amount of maintenance people in this area, you would employ all of them. You're going to get to a point where you can't do auto repair. at some point. So right now, we will suck up anybody with any auto experience to do manufacturing maintenance. That's a bad deal, right? That's telling you that we are far short. So when economists talk about looking outwardly, I can tell you there is labor across the United States. You are a destination people would move to, but you don't have unique things that, Yankton, South Dakota, I'll give you an example. They have the Missouri River and they have a reservoir. They talk about the same things that are done here. You have to have housing, you have to have those things, but there is immigrant labor that will come here that is legal right now. You could be in Puerto Rico, a United States citizen. You go to the border, there is lots of legal labor down there that doesn't know what's up here. We brought them up all the time. In 2015, and then the one point, and she's no longer here, about discriminatory behavior in the region. In 2015, we had banks that shut Hispanic employees out, would not serve them. If you can believe that. They stopped doing that when we talked about the Department of Labor to them. But by 2019, we were being begged to bring in our labor in the area to help them grow because the school districts were shutting down. So it's a very interesting conversation. It's just realized almost every other community in the area is having similar conversations. It's a zero-sum game if you don't expand where you're at.
So the replacement population for the United States, for a population of in industrialized countries is 2.1. Currently, we're at 2.01 as a nation if we don't include immigration. In other words, in a consumption-led economy, you need enough humanity producing and consuming whatever it is that's going on in the economy. Even though we're number 1 or 2 in manufacturing jobs with Indiana, Wisconsin, we flip back and forth. We are ever so increasing to a new millennium knowledge technology-based economy, which requires, again, in any consumption economy, enough human beings, which means growth. So in that regard, what is it we can do in any of our areas, whether it's Marshfield or Wisconsin Rapids or Wausau or Cassville or Washington County, to draw human beings? We don't grow enough, we don't keep enough, we don't retain enough, we don't attract enough. What is it we can do to position ourselves for future success in terms of population?
Do we have accurate information? If we have accurate information, what are we doing with it? You have all these different entities that have all these different pieces of information, and can we pull it together? There's 8,000 studies about housing. What is it that's the right size of housing? Do we know in Marathon County, is the average household growing or shrinking, or is it status quo? Do we have that information? What is important to a 24-year-old next generation workforce person? Is home ownership important to them? Or is affordable rent more important to them? High-speed internet, whatever is important to them. We have our blank slate downtown. What's important? What type of housing is it that we're going to build? What information did we use to attain that information? Or are we telling the market, here's what we got, hope it fits? To me, I think it's important for, as James mentioned, we've got all this information, the talking is done, and it's now time to implement. Forward thinking. Get a plan. Get somebody like Tip Strategies up here, say, all right, Marathon County, Lance, Katie, this is the plan. Both of you get on the same page and let's do this. And now implement the plan. John, I'll take my cut when you come back to Wausau. But just to implement a plan and to move it forward. This gentleman right here said, every community in the state is having this same conversation. The conversation doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything without action and implementation.
Agree. I don't have anything to add to that. I think it's complex, and when it's complex, the best thing to do is go trying to simplify the problem so you can take action. Otherwise, you're going to spin, and I think our communities are spinning.
It's not just the region, it's the country.
The whole entire country is having the same exact conversation because the baseline data is the same all over the United States. The places that are growing the fastest are the ones that have the least amount of regulation, the least hurdles to having that kind of development. The answer to your question for how to solve all the different pieces you talked about, from blue collar to housing, all the way up and back and forth, Elon Musk is just privatizing all of it. He's literally building a town down in Texas for his business purposes. I'm not saying that's the solution that everybody in America should have, but housing seems to be the one that we keep coming back to because it's the hurdle that people can't get over. The apartments, we've had more apartments built in downtown West Bend than you can shake a stick at in the last 10 years. Prior to the year 2000, there was almost 5,000 jobs on the West Bend of the Milwaukee River. 5,000, West Bend Company, Bend Industries, Gale Manufacturing, Rolf's, it could go on. Today, all of those jobs, about 350 are gone. It's almost all been replaced by rentals, apartment buildings. And their market rate, the market rate for a one-bedroom apartment in that river area is about $1,800 a month. Who do you think is living there? I mean, you just go hang out at the coffee shop at the lower level and watch. It's baby boomers who've all left. Somebody was talking about it before. They've all left the houses that they had on 5 acres, and they moved into the inner city, inner city West Bend, downtown West Bend on the river because it's super convenient. So I completely agree. It's about what is the market actually telling you? And I think if we're going to try to come forward with solutions, I'm on a national task force on housing, and it's counties from all across the country, and they are all trying to resolve exactly the same issue. What's different with what we've got going in Washington County is we followed exactly the template that was talked about a moment ago. You got to listen to what the market is actually saying. And by market, I literally mean the blue-collar worker who's working on the line. Where do you want to live? What is it you want? And the answer for us is, well, I want a house, but I'm moving to Waupun, which is 45 minutes northwest in Dodge County, because there is nothing even remotely affordable in Washington County. And God forbid you get closer to Milwaukee for a variety of reasons. But the bottom line is, what we have found is you are correct. We as a nation are in competition with one another. And until we start to come to some consensus on a shared vision for how to keep our kids and then start figuring out that immigration situation that was talked about earlier, we have to provide solutions that are responsive to what people are actually asking for, both today and what they're asking for over their lifetime.
We have time for one more question from the audience. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, a few things that stood out to me. I like how Scott had said with outreach to the Monk community, but what if we did that in a larger scale? I mean, I feel like there's so many jobs that people don't know about from my age group that they don't even know exist. And for example, this is great to be at, and there's not a whole lot of my age group here. I'd love to see something where there's a few different businesses come and do kind of presentations on what they have to offer, but how are we targeting my age group? And another thing that stood out to me is just listening. We have diverse thinkers in this room, and it's so great to hear from you, and I'm happy to be here because I'm passionate about this topic. But I'm sure we each have something we'd want to say that we think can be changed in this.
Who would like to start this?
Well, I can take the first swing at it. Thank you for coming. Love to have you here. First and foremost, I believe placemaking. I'm a very big proponent of placemaking. I think it is vital for the Wausau community to connect the downtown and the river. I think it is absolutely essential to create something that is unique. You go to other communities, you go to Green Bay and Oshkosh, their developments are along the water. Their developments, for the most part, are done. We, again, pretty blank slate so far. The vision to create by listening and then implementing, I think, is important. I think that is an absolutely integral part to make Wausau a place that folks of your age want to come here, want to be a part of this community, listen to the type of housing that they want to. What type of facilities are we building? How much is office? How much is retail space? How much is rental space or apartments? Do these people have the opportunity to own those apartments or condos? Or what is the right size for them? What's the right price range? You can build, we can all build it, and it'll be great. But unless we're listening, and that's going to attract the people. First, sense of place, and then provide the amenities that are going to support that place of space.
So the one thing I'd add to that is, I think we need to try and avoid being everything to everybody, because then you become nothing to nobody. And so I think it's important that we do focus on what sets us apart and what creates an element of distinction we can create, because we do have a number of factors that really can create distinction in this marketplace. And it's focusing and narrowing in on what are those going to be and putting extra effort behind building those out and telling that story. So I think that's just a core element to it, because if we try to do everything for everybody, we can never get agreement.
My takeaway today, though, I mean, this is great to have conversations and to engage, to think, to identify what's going on in our region and think about it maybe from different perspectives. But as we leave here, I mean, I think there's a need to actually look at our own capacity and become aligned and actually not think that somebody else is going to take care of this. As all of us panelists are up here, we're not going to fix it ourselves. We need everybody in this room and your organizations to align on something that you heard or were passionate about and get involved and actually start taking action and move the needle for our region in these efforts, because it's going to take the entire region to work together to do these things. So get involved.
We're going to conclude the panel discussion here, but change, we may love the communities we're in. We may each relish where we live now and our lifestyle. But change is going to happen. It can either happen to us or we can affect it and create the future we desire. I applaud the young lady in the back of the room for, I guess, being an emerging leader and shaping the future that we desire, that we want to live in. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating and thanking this panel. Thank you.